Good morning. It's Sunday, the 11th of October. My name is Richard Waddell, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's service of the North Chapel Unitarian Universalist Society in Woodstock, Vermont. I'm sitting at Sumner Falls on the Connecticut River in Heartland, Vermont. The Connecticut River is the longest river in New England, flowing from its source just below the Canadian border, and it goes all the way to the Long Island Sound. All of the rivers from the Green Mountains east flow into the Connecticut River, and that includes the Ottaquechee River, which runs behind North Chapel, so there's a great connection. Poem by Wendell Berry. From the porch at dusk, I watched a kingfisher, wild in flight. He could only have made for joy. He came down the river, splashing against the water's dimming face like a skipped rock passing down out of sight. And still, I could hear the splashes farther and farther away as it grew darker. He came back the same way, dusky as his shadow, sudden beyond the willows. The splashes went on out of hearing. It was dark then. Somewhere the night had accommodated him at a place he was headed, or where, led by his delight, he came. Please join us in singing our hymn, We Sing of Golden Mornings.
Hello, my name is Laura Foley, and today I'm speaking to you again from Woodstock, Vermont, from a beautiful field. And this is October now, and I wrote a poem recently really about the times that we're living in, reflecting on the times we're living in, the trying times, and perhaps how to get through, or one way. It's called That Splendid Thing. After I lose the tomatoes and basil to frost, hoe under bean plants, peppers, squash, and melons, late blooming strawberries exhausted with fruit. After the daily calamities announced on the news, shutdowns in Paris, Tokyo, Rio, New York, anxieties of injustice, unfair elections, amass and cover my heart and my mind. I have to sit for a long while away from other humans, my only companions, a soft autumn wind, a canine friend, oaks trembling with rust, maples about to blaze into flame, and a striped, hairy caterpillar crawling over my leg, its long silver hairs shining in the temporary sun, reminding me I'm here now, I'm alive, that still splendid thing.
Good morning and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. The title of this morning's reflection is Power Outage and the Sheer Enjoyment of Being. It draws on Eastern philosophy, on the book of Matthew, and on the wisdom of a 14-year-old student who blew my mind. She really touched me with the power of her thinking. You know, they say that our true colors reveal themselves most clearly in the fall. In an old film called The Lion of Winter from 1968, two men are facing judicial execution. The first man turns to the second one there. He turns in fear and bitterness. Frantically and unwisely, he claims that nothing really matters anymore. The second man did not join the first man's fear and bitterness. Rather, he stayed in his power. He straightened his tie. He dusted his jacket. And at this, the second man's gesture of relative optimism, the first man cried out, "You fool," as if it matters how a man falls down. And the second man replied, when the fall is all that's left, it matters a great deal. It is important to be careful with fear and bitterness. They say that our true colors show up most clearly in the fall. In real life, right here in Woodstock, Vermont, 2 leaves were preparing to change their colors and leap from the tree limb in autumn. The first leaf turns to the second in fear and in bitterness. Afraid of the inevitable great leap that is before her, she claimed that nothing really mattered anymore. But the second leaf again did not join the first leaf's bitterness. Rather, she stayed in her power, and at this gesture of relative optimism, the first leaf cried out, "You fool!" as if it matters how a leaf falls down. And the second leaf responded, asking, "Have you ever thought that you could fly?" There was a bright light in her eye when she said these words. The second leaf said, "Because we know we have to leave this tree, but flight is also possible. We can fall or we can fly. The choice is up to us. And I choose to fly, but that's going to take a little work." And the first leaf didn't quite know what to say, so the second leaf continued asking, Do you read Toni Morrison? Because she said if you want to fly, you have to give up on the things that weigh you down. And with this thought and with the next good wind, off the 2 leaves went, leaping on out into the sky and into the air. Who knows what happened, but for a moment, the autumn sky was beautiful. It's fun to imagine conversations between autumn leaves as they change their colors, as they go through their wardrobes, wondering what they might wear upon the wind. They say that our true colors show most clearly in the fall, but I say that our true colors show up most clearly in the flight. What do you think? Everywhere around us at this particular time of year, leaves are changing and picking out their paths into the midair. Autumn leaves are falling down and flying up everywhere. I've always loved this season, this particular time of year, with its gusts of wind. For seconds at a time, the sky is littered with beautiful, colorful falling and flying leaves. It's fleeting in this season, but the sky is so filled with wonder. Wonder reveals itself in different ways. It can be light or sentimental. It can be powerful and fierce. It goes both ways, and we need both ways. Both ways are required of us, especially now. Now, when things feel so tense and conditioned by the ongoing COVID crisis, especially now when things feel so strange and challenging. Toni Morrison said, "If we want to fly, we have to give up on the things that weigh us down." I get weighed down by the heaviness of the world sometimes. I think that might have to do with why I love the morning as much as I do. Not that I don't sleep through it half the time. But in the morning, something lifts, something rises. And I love the morning. I love daybreak right through to the sunrise. In fact, I start most of my reflections with the words, "Good morning," because something lifts and something rises within me when I say those words. I want to be part of that rising. I was so angry last week. I was angry and I was bitter about the presidential debate. I had spent 2 Sunday mornings away from North Chapel, so I was feeling a little bit lonely and disconnected. I had trouble getting back from my time away. I went on a staycation in this strange time of coronavirus. I couldn't vacation like in normal times. I couldn't really go anywhere, not without feeling nervous and uncomfortable and at risk. That's not relaxing, so I just stayed home. I had a staycation right here in Vermont, but I ended up feeling a bit empty and disconnected at the end of things. I didn't come back home because I'd never really left in the first place. And before too long, I got back into the general swing of things, but things swing so differently these days. Things that used to swing easily before seem new and unfamiliar somehow. so I was a little raw and insecure and unsure of myself in the run-up to the presidential debates. And I was further knocked off balance once I saw them. I was fearful and I was bitter, and I let those things take over for a little while. It was rough, but then I made things even worse for myself by clinging to the weight of all of this. This was a bad choice. It was heavy, and it felt like such a drag. A poet writes, "Gravity is working against me, and gravity always wants to bring me down." That was me. I wasn't making anything better for myself. I was just being righteous and dismissive. I was sinking away and shrinking away from the miracle. The poet continues, "I'll never know what makes a man, with all the love his heart can stand, dream of ways to throw it all away." That was me. I was angry. Now, John Mayer wrote these words, and their meaning is clear to me. Gravity clearly is working against us all. Gravity always wants to bring us down, and it always will, but flight is also possible. And if we really want to fly, we have to give up on gravity. We have to learn to defy it for a little while. John Mayer writes, "Twice as much isn't twice as good, and it can't sustain like the one half could. It's wanting more that's going to send me to my knees." When I hear these words, I can recognize them within myself. I identify because I am brought so low by my own greed and by my own desire. It's shocking to me how consistently it happens. It always happens. In fact, it's never otherwise, and yet I am still surprised when I get all needy and greedy and I feel dark and heavy in my heart, and I feel it often. I can feel that way a lot. I have the capacity for it. I can feel needy and greedy and dark and heavy in my soul. Although I tend to justify myself whenever I can by falsely blaming others or even falsely blaming myself. And when I do this, I'm always shocked by what I see. Shocked when I'm not looking back at me. It's not a good habit to look outward without looking inward as well. We need both of these. I will have to let go of the heaviness if I'm going to fly, because I'm so full of beans sometimes, I can be hard-headed and righteous and angry with the best of them, and I can do something that's even more dangerous. I can be this way to myself. I noticed this capacity when I was reading my own poetry. I had written some lines that surprised me. I had written, "I don't believe in cocaine or in any serum that I can melt in a spoon, tripping on my own wings. And I don't believe in bad dreams when my youngest daughter lay asleep in my arms, rising like this day's youngest light. And I don't believe in violence or in the sorrows that I keep on the shelf, or in the impossible angers that I fire at you, or the invisible arrows that I aim at myself." I loved these lines when I first wrote them, or more accurately, when these lines first wrote me. The poem felt like it came through me. I felt like it was my job to stay out of the way. Now, the poem isn't literally true. I have not ever tried cocaine, and I have bad dreams all the time, and I don't have a child. I don't have a daughter, certainly not a youngest one. The point of the poem, it's just not about the facts. It's a flight of the imagination, a journey in which new things are possible. Its poet seeks the company of those who are just like me, those who don't believe in violence or sorrow, those who don't believe in outward anger fired at others, or in the inbound arrows that cut us deep. So the poet is incomplete, though. He is unblossomed and unrealized until he crosses the magical bridge into his own unknown. For I also seek the company of those who are not like me. I seek the company of those parts of myself that are hidden from me by my narrowness, by my pretenses. I am not comfortable confessing this, but I am not entirely nonviolent. I do believe in violence, especially in cases of self-defense. So I am in contradiction. I am a complexity. And I suspect that I am not alone. I say that I don't believe in sorrow, but I sure keep it in a jar on a shelf. I say that I don't believe in anger, but I sure fire it at others. I say that I don't believe in the invisible arrows that I aim at myself, but I am clearly injured by them, clearly bleeding from them. On the surface of things, my poetry is rather strange. It doesn't make much sense at all. It's full of contradictions, but it's full of contradictions, the deeper and deeper you go, and so am I. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the wisdom. Maybe we should try to stop making so much sense of things for a little while, as if joy had a business plan and reportable, measurable levels of success. Maybe that's what this changing season will teach us, with its soaking rains and its gusting winds and its falling leaves and turnings. Maybe it's enough sometimes to step back and enjoy and bear witness to all of that. Alan Watts, that Eastern philosopher and Western theologian all wrapped up in one, he had something interesting to say about all of this. He said, the Japanese have a word, yugien. They describe yugien as watching geese fly and be hidden by the clouds. Watching as ships at sea vanish behind a distant island. Wandering on in a great forest with no aim of return. Have you ever done this? Haven't you ever gone for a walk with no particular purpose in mind? End quote. It can be such a powerful experience. The important thing to remember is that the world is just the world. It's not performing for us. We are active participants, not passive observers, however it is we choose to live our lives. You know, one of my favorite movies is called Dead Poets Society. It's a story of a bunch of privileged high school boys who learn the value of poetry. They really get into it. They find the old books and they read the old poems and they bring the old magic to life. They kindle a flame in one another. They find their courage, even though they weren't really looking for it. The boys were live-in students in a stuffy old prestigious New England prep school. And on the nights of the meetings of the Dead Poets Society, the boys would sneak out of their dorm rooms late at night, and they would gather in a place that they referred to as the Old Indian Cave. It was out in the forest, far beyond the rolling hills of the private school. And on misty nights, yugien would happen. The boys would run into the mist and out of sight. The boys were like ships passing into the darkness. They were like geese disappearing into the clouds, filled all up to the bursting with the sheer enjoyment of being alive. You don't have to make a point of everything. You just have to live your life out loud, and you have to love it. And sometimes under the right conditions, life can be miraculous. And the miracle happens all on its own. Our job is to be open to it. Our job is to let it happen and to stay out of the way. The point of all of this is that not everything has a point. The point of the poem is to be a poem, not to make our socks roll up and down. It's not entertainment, it's deeper than that. A poem is the joy of life. We can judge the joy of life, but if we want to, but it doesn't care. It just strolls through the world and sees and is and listens and writes its own name on the water and gets carried away, just like the leaves that fall onto the surface of a lake. In a way, life is like an experiment in pointlessness. Better said, life is like an experiment in the sheer enjoyment of being. And this sheer enjoyment, it's like a power that animates life. Alan Watts says you carry a stick with you and you occasionally hit at old stumps. You wander along and sometimes twiddle your thumbs. And it's at that moment that you are a perfectly rational human being. You've learned purposelessness. This is yugien. This purposelessness, it's liberating. It's not a defeated thing at all, quite the opposite. It is vitality itself. It is the very life of life. Alan Watts reminds us that all music is purposeless, which is to say that it is filled with the vitality that can inspire us, bringing life to lifelessness. Alan Watts asks, is music getting somewhere? I mean, if the aim of a symphony were to get to the final bar, the best conductor would be the one who got there the fastest. When you dance, you don't aim to arrive at a particular place on the floor. Is this the idea of dancing? No. The aim of dancing is to dance. So why rush? Why rage? Why worry? Not that I don't do these things all the time. Surely I rush, I rage, I worry, I do these things all of the time, but it rarely gets me anywhere. In fact, it always brings me down just like gravity. Is it more or less the same for you? If so, what keeps us from the lightness? What keeps us from having the confidence that we will be all right, in spite of all the evidence to the contrary? We rush to get to meetings on time, even the ones on Zoom. We rage when our political world seems strained to the point of breaking. We worry about money, about our hair, about our clothes. And when we don't really have to worry about such things, not as desperately as we do. In the book of Matthew, it is written, "Look at the flowers of the field, how they grow. They neither labor nor spin, yet I tell you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like any one of them. So if God so clothes the wild grass which lives for today and tomorrow is burned, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith?" This is deep, this teaching from the Gospel of Matthew, and I'm moved by it. We don't have to worry so much about our money, our hair, our clothes, not when it distracts us from a higher good. The question is not, what shall we wear to impress the world today? The question is, how shall we clothe in truth and beauty the moments that make up our lives? I was angry with some friends of mine. We were talking politics. Dear friends who are different than me. I love them so, but they don't see the world in the same way that I do. And there are times when the truth confronts us so powerfully, and all the wind goes out of my sails. I wonder if it's the same for them. It's like a power outage. All my lights go out. It's like a sudden loss of power in the neighborhood of my life. The news had come out, bad news. After years of reassurances to the contrary, after years of being told that the president's taxes were in order, the bad news came out that they were not. It's hard when things break in such a way. And I called my friend, a friend that I've had for more than 40 years, and asked him, what does this mean for you? I was hoping for a connection that was not possible before, but it didn't happen. My friend quickly responded. He said, he didn't break any laws. And something within me fell. I knew he was saying this. I knew that saying this for him was not something that brought him joy. I felt that in him, and I felt that in me. I felt like we were falling, that we were no longer in flight. I felt the presence of fear and bitterness. I was stunned and disappointed. I wish that I had responded better at the time. At the time, I said nothing. I wish that I had turned to him compassionately and said, it doesn't matter that, as you say, he did not break the law. It matters to me, and perhaps maybe it matters to us, that he did not abide by the law. It matters that we honor the spirit of the law, not simply its letter. We are wiser than what we can get away with in court. We are at a turning point, culturally, politically. No matter what happens in the coming weeks, things will never be the same. Nothing made me see this more clearly than the closing moments of the vice presidential debates Just earlier this week, moderator Susan Page, the Washington bureau chief of USA Today, she ended the debate most eloquently. She asked a question that was written by a Utah student in junior high school. The question itself restored the power in me, perhaps in us. An 8th grader named Brecklin Brown had this to say and this to ask. When I watch the news, she says, all I see is arguing between Democrats and Republicans when I watch the news. All I see is citizen fighting against citizen when I watch the news. All I see are two candidates from opposing parties trying to tear each other down. If our leaders can't get along, how are the citizens supposed to get along? Your examples, she said, could make all the difference to bring us together. Now, how do we do this now? How do we bring ourselves together to restore the power that has gone out, to become indivisible once again? Toni Morrison said, if you want to fly, you have to give up on the things that weigh you down. So we have to give up on some things. If we don't, then perhaps the fall is all that remains. We have to give up on some things that weigh us down, but we don't have to hold on to and cherish, but we also have to hold on to and cherish that which lifts us and keeps us free. In other words, we don't have to give up on one another. When we do, we lose touch with what is real. No, we have to give up on the fantasies that lead us astray. We have to give up on the ignorance that keeps us divided and in conflict. We need each other as we are moving into a challenging time in the world, in our nation, and in our hearts. We have to give up on the rush and on the rage and the worry that makes life too heavy. However we find it, we have to find the faith that makes us free, free enough to restore the power that we need in the neighborhood of our lives. The fall is not all that remains, not by any stretch of the imagination. Flight is also possible. Good flight, real flight, healthy, restorative flight. Not flights of fantasy, not flights of ignorance, but flights of creativity and imagination, flights of wonder. In other words, flights of grace. However it is that we find it, whatever name we assign to its gift, let's find grace. Let's defy some gravity for a little while. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
The falling leaves drift by my window. The falling leaves of red and gold. I see your lips, the summer kisses, the sunburned hands I used to hold. Since you went away, the days grow long, and soon I'll hear old winter's song. But I miss you most of all, my darling. When autumn leaves start to fall, since you went away. The days grow long, and soon I'll hear old winter's song. But I miss you most of all, my darling. When autumn leaves start to fall,